Welcome to today's Alumni Career Services webinar, hosted by the Georgetown University Alumni Association. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for How to Know When It's Time to Go with Hallie Crawford, Certified Career Coach, Speaker, Author, and National Career Expert. I'm Allie Heel, the Regional Engagement Coordinator in Alumni Relations, and I'll be facilitating today's session. As a reminder, you may use the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel to submit your questions throughout the session or to let me know if you have any technical issues. Now, on to our presenter. Hallie Crawford is a certified career coach, speaker, author, and national career expert with over 21 years of experience. Her company, Create Your Career Path, is headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. She is regularly featured in the media, Forbes, CNN, Money Magazine, and the Wall Street Journal, and has undergraduate and graduate degrees from Vanderbilt University and the University of Illinois. With over 2,000 success stories, her team of coaches and resume writers help professionals find jobs that make them want to jump out of bed in the morning and go to work. So without further ado, I am pleased to turn things over to Hallie.
Thank you, Allie. Greatly appreciate that. And I'm thrilled to be here with you all today. Our recent running joke has been helping people find jobs that make them want to jump out of bed in the morning to walk down the hall to go to work at their home office. And I have been moving around for a long time to different spots in my home just to kind of mix things up a little bit with this working remotely. It's obviously changed things for all of us so much. This is a huge hot topic. When I was watching the news last night, they were talking about the Great Resignation, obviously still going on, and how many jobs that are out there. I think they said it was about 2 jobs for every person who's unemployed, that just so many people are wondering whether they want to make a move, if they should change their job. And the things that we're going to be talking about today are things that advice that we give to all of our clients. So as Allie said, I'm a certified career coach. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. We have been coaching and training since 2002. So it's been a really long time and we love what we do. And my undergrad is from Vanderbilt and have a master's degree from the University of Illinois. And we are finding that so many people are coming to us, including existing clients that maybe weren't sure if they wanted to make a move or not. But it's almost like people are saying to themselves these days, so if this is you, you're not alone. These days they're saying, well, gosh, maybe I should be looking. Everyone else is looking. It's like the popular thing to do, so to speak. So we want to help you really figure out whether it's time to make a move or not and be smart about making that decision versus just jumping or checking things out just for the heck of it, okay? When we talk about this, one of the things that we always want everyone to kind of consider first when they're thinking about whether it's time to make a change or a move is we've heard lots of different things from our clients, and this is some of the things that we want to tell them that, in some cases you may have realized working from home that your coworkers and maybe having that interaction with people was a critical piece to your career fulfillment. So you may fall in that camp where you were like, I can't wait to go back to the office and I really want to because that interaction was something that really meant a lot to me as part of my fulfillment of my job. We've had people tell us the complete opposite. They'll say, I never want to go back to the office and I always want to work remotely. They've said to us, for example, how do I tell my boss that I never want to see her again in person? Haha, right? And as a result, many of us understandably have become less motivated in different ways from this working from home or hybrid model, et cetera. We have felt less connected, not just to our coworkers, but to our organizations and the mission of our organizations too. And as a result, a lot of people feel less engaged. And this is all of what has been kind of fueling the Great Resignation. And so one of the first things we want you to think about kind of right out of the box is how long have you felt this way before you make a decision whether it's time to make a move or not. So have you felt kind of disengaged or unsatisfied pre-COVID, or has it mostly been during COVID? Because you want to think about how those changes have impacted your satisfaction at work so that you know whether it's really inherently a problem, let's say at your current organization and maybe the culture there, or in your current role, or if it's more about, well, it's all of these changes in the work environment, and it's not just about, let's say, my industry. So I don't need to make a move within my industry necessarily. I need to make a move like to a different company or to a different industry. So we want you to consider how long you have felt this way to help you kind of narrow down exactly what's at the core of you feeling like you may need to make a change, because that will help you figure out how dramatic of a change you may need to make or not, okay? So here's our agenda for today. Let's talk about this first and go over what we're going to discuss really quickly. We're going to talk about why it's important to be in the right career fit. We'll give you 8 red flags for knowing if you are definitely in the wrong fit and you need to make some kind of move. We want to talk with you too about defining fulfillment first and why that's such a critical piece to understanding whether it's time to make a change or not. And we'll also, at the end, before we get to Q&A, because we will have time for Q&A at the end, we will also share with you our ideal career model that can serve as a checklist for you to really evaluate, okay, am I in the right fit or not? And what are the different components? How many things are kind of out of whack, if you will, and how many things are actually in place so that, again, you can start to figure out, okay, A, do I need to make a change? And B, how dramatic of a change do I really need to make at the end of the day? Because we would prefer that people don't make a dramatic change if they don't need to. It's easier to not have to do that, right? Just as a quick also admin item, we will have Q&A at the end, so you can go ahead and submit your questions in the Q&A box as we go, and we'll address as many of those as we can close to the end of the presentation. And if anyone would like a copy of our slides, we are happy to share those with you. You can just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com and we'll send you a link to download those from our website. So let's dive in and talk first about why it's so important to be engaged at work and be in the right career fit. The goal is to not be like the man on this slide. It's important because our work impacts our personal lives. We just know that. Too many people are always or tend to be unengaged at work, and we're seeing that even more so with the Great Resignation. It takes a toll on our quality of life, both inside and outside of the workplace. And people who are not as fulfilled or engaged at work or happy are twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression, anxiety, other issues. We all know how this goes. We spend a lot of time at work. It's important for us to be in the right fit. And we assert that people actually can feel excited about going to work. Are you going to love it every single minute of every single day? No, not necessarily. And we'll talk about being realistic as we go today. But you can find a really good sense of satisfaction in what you do and enjoy going to work. Let's talk next about why we get stuck in the wrong fit. And I'm sorry, my dog apparently has something to say about this. My boyfriend upstairs will help handle that. We get stuck in the wrong fit for a lot of different reasons. So one of the other things that we would encourage you to do actually right away too, while you start to think about how long have I felt this sense of dissatisfaction, think right now too about why are you in your current job? And list out those reasons. Are they good reasons or are they bad reasons? Do you have a lot of good reasons for why you're there, or you can't come up with that many? So you want to think about why you're in your current position. And that's one of the kind of like quizzes or exercises that you can do to help you determine, okay, am I staying here for some good reasons or not so much? There are lots of different reasons why we get stuck in the wrong fit. We may be really good at our jobs and we've gotten good at it over the years, let's say, and we've become pigeonholed, but it's no longer rewarding or challenging for us. We may have chosen our jobs because our family members or a friend said, hey, you'd be really good at this job. Why don't you try it out? There's plenty of us out there that the job was offered to us and we needed it to pay our graduate school bills. That was me. And some people will tell us that they are staying because of the salary, or what we call the golden handcuffs. We had a client once tell us that she was actually in sales, and it seemed like her organization kind of got a sense when everyone was becoming unsatisfied with their work and they would throw a new phone or a new car at them or something like that. So there are lots of reasons why we get stuck in the wrong fit, and you want to make sure that you've got a really good solid list of, okay, why am I here? will help you with that today. And we'll talk a little bit more about career assessments as we go here. So I'm not going to touch on that now. We'll continue on and I'll touch on that in just a little bit. One of the first things that we also want you to think about too, and I've already alluded to it in the past few minutes, is we want you to think about not just, okay, do I need to make a career change? Because obviously that's why we're here today, but we also want you to really strongly consider how dramatic of a change is needed for me to be in the right fit. Because what we have found with our clients, just FYI, kind of the good news is that the majority of the time, you don't have to make as dramatic of a change as you might think you need to make. What happens to us, understandably, is when we're unsatisfied and unhappy, especially if it's been a long time, we tend to think that, oh, I need to go do something completely different in order to be satisfied. But 9 times out of 10, our clients are able to make more of a course correction in order to be satisfied and happy with what they do. So you want to think of yourself as on a continuum, if you will, and like, how unsatisfied am I? And what is actually going on to generate that satisfaction? And therefore, how big of a change do I actually need to make? And if you take a look at this slide, and if we could actually, Allie, go ahead and launch our first poll, that would be fantastic. If you feel like you're relatively satisfied, maybe it's like 50-50, you want to be prepared, you know, in case something changes. You want to be thinking about a strategic career plan. And for you, if you feel like, you know, I'm not running out the door with my hair on fire, so to speak, maybe for you, it's that you just need to do the same thing that you're doing now, but in a different industry or in a new organization. If you're, you know, a little bit more unsatisfied and it's a little bit like the scales are tipped a little bit more than 50-50, you want to think to yourself about, okay, what is working for me at my current job or in my current career path, and what doesn't work? And in that case, you may need a little bit more of a dramatic change, like a completely new role, but maybe within the same industry, or a new role, but at a different organization that's completely different. And if you are incredibly unsatisfied, you may need to consider a larger change, which would mean something like a completely new role, maybe in a completely new industry. But again, as you're thinking about this and as we work through the poll, and Allie will share those for us verbally as well, we want you to think of yourself as unsatisfied on a continuum and really think about, hey, I may not have to make as big of a change as I'm thinking just because I'm that unhappy. All right, so what have we got for our poll results?
Yeah. So we had 31% of people respond yes and 69% respond no.
Okay, which kind of makes sense. That's why you're here. And part of why, and thanks, Allie, for sharing, part of why we talk about this is we want you to know, A, that you're not alone, and B, that we want you to think of your satisfaction, like how often during the course of a day or a week are you unsatisfied? And that will help you, again, on a continuum, figure out, you know, what the right thing is to do, what kind of change you need to make. So the good news is, as we've kind of already been saying, so I won't spend a ton of time on this slide, is that we have found you can be really engaged and fulfilled in your work. That's the good news. And it's usually less dramatic of a change than you think. So think about it in terms of role, think about it in terms of industry, and think about it in terms of organization. Those are kind of the 3 levers that you want to be considering and playing with when you're figuring out, okay, what type of change do I need to make? Now, part of this, when you're thinking about the change, is we want you to be realistic as well. And here's how we talk about it with our clients. You know, we've all heard before, do what you love and the money will follow, right? And what I tell our clients is that, yes, to a certain extent, but it's not that easy or simple, and it's not always that perfect and, you know, great. So what I would say is that, yes, if you do what you love, the money will follow to a certain extent, the majority of the time, or that it won't feel like work to you as much. Because I will tell you that I absolutely love what I do and have felt that way for the last 22 years, but I've also worked very, very hard to get there. So it's not like this, you know, easy street necessarily. And the goal, though, if you look at the bottom of this slide, the goal that we want you to be going for, to be realistic about this satisfaction at work, so to speak, is not that it's going to be perfection all the time, because that is unrealistic. You are always going to have things about your job that you don't like as much. There are things about what I do that I would rather not have to do, right? There are always going to be things that are uncomfortable for you, maybe coworkers that you don't enjoy working with as much, et cetera, et cetera. But what we want you to go for, and we know is achievable, is that the good parts about your job, the things that you enjoy, can so far outweigh the bad things, the things you don't like as much, that you barely notice those things you don't enjoy. And what we have found is that when people are at choice about their career path and not feeling like, oh, I just fell into this, or I don't feel like I've been in control of my career path, it's just sort of unfolded in front of me, or I haven't thought about it that much. When they take back control and say, this is what I want now and what I want today. And the good news is, by the way, that employers are listening. It's an employee's market, and you can ask for more, I would say, than you have ever been able to in history. That you can ask for more, but you can go for something that will give you the majority of the time that kind of satisfaction, okay? And that you feel like you're in greater control, or when you feel like you are at choice where you're choosing to compromise in terms of the next step for you, you will feel so much better because you're in the driver's seat a little bit more too. So we want you to be realistic, but we also want you to think about, okay, what kind of change do I need to make? Let's talk about tip number 2, and this is our 8 flags for knowing for sure if you are in the wrong fit. And at the end of this kind of quiz, so to speak, we'll show you what the answers are and kind of how to know if you're for sure in the wrong fit and it's time to make a move. So here are our first 4. Number 1, if you feel like you dread getting out of bed every single morning, it's not just those Monday morning blues, but it's pretty much every single day, that's a big red flag. Number 2, if you feel like your work relationships and your performance are suffering in some way, shape, or form, and it's not just because of the COVID impact, that's another big red flag. Number 3, if you gain very little or no joy or satisfaction from your work, pretty much at all, or it's so minimal that maybe it's like 10% of the time, that's not good. That's a big red flag. And number 4, if you started to slack off and are getting this sense of like senioritis, if you will, and have little or no motivation, that's not a good thing either. Our next 4 are really important. And number 5, I think, is really important. If you feel like you have to become someone else at work, or kind of automatically become someone else at work in order to like fit in with the culture or to be able to perform effectively, etc., and therefore you're not being as authentic as you could be, that's a really big red flag. And that's something we hear a lot from our clients. Number 6, if your job is not making use of your skills, strengths, and talents, and not just that it's not making use of them, but maybe it's not making use of the ones that you want to be leveraging and using, or it's not making use of the ones that you want to use on a consistent, regular basis, or not frequently enough, that's a big problem. And number 7, if you spend most of your time complaining about your job, not a good thing. And finally, number 8, if you regularly fantasize about quitting, being fired, or let go, that's obviously a really bad thing. Let me show you the results, and I'll tell you a very quick story here. One of our clients we were working with, this was years ago, and she's just a really good kind of poignant example. She got on the phone with one of our coaches, and she sounded really good, like for the first few seconds. And the coach said to her, gosh, you sound really good today. What's up? What's going on? And she said, I got fired last week. Now, not everyone, I realize, is going to say that, because we don't actually, no one wants to get fired. But for her, she was having a really hard time, even though she was starting to realize that her job and her organization was a really bad fit for her. She was having a hard time walking out the door without having something else lined up. And it took that to really give her the push and kind of shove that she needed, honestly, in order to take a stand for finding something new and really doing the work to find a new job and a new position and a new direction. So that's our red flag test. And if you take a look at this next slide and think about your results, if you've got 1 or 2 red flags, you may just be going through a rough patch. Like we said before, we want you to think about how long have you been unsatisfied. And if it's just one or two, you may want to think to yourself, okay, let me reevaluate this in 2 or 3 months. Let me try to make some changes where I am now and see if that makes a difference. And I can reevaluate in 3 months, given the things that Hallie's giving me today, boom, 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 make a decision at that point. If you've got 3 or 4 red flags, you're probably not in the right career, but you may be closer than you think to your ideal direction. We want you to write down what works for you at your current career path or your current job, do both, and what doesn't work to get you started in a practical, tangible way, being objective about what's really going on for you. When you make a list like this, it helps you kind of get out of your head and get out of that frustrating emotional state that you might be in so that you can be more practical, realistic, and objective about what's really going on. And let's go ahead, Ellie, if we could launch our next poll, that would be fantastic. As we're talking about, if you have 5 or more red flags, it's definitely time to make a change. Now, when you're thinking about this again, remember, it's not just about making a decision of, okay, do I need to stay or go, but also how dramatic of a change you need to make. And while you all are completing this next poll, just another quick item too, we do want everyone to always just, even if it's for a couple of minutes or even just for like the next few weeks, see if there's a way to make changes at your current position that can help you. Now, I realize that some of you may be well beyond that. You've already tried that, it didn't work, and that's fine. Okay, it's time to make a move. But we always want people to look in their own backyard just in case, because in some cases, we've had clients actually go to their supervisor or HR, and their organization was willing to move them to another department or another role, and that actually helped and increased their satisfaction. So as you're filling out this poll, just kind of keep those things in mind, and then we will read these out in just a minute what the results are.
So we had 12% of people answer yes, 37% of people answered no, and 51% answered unsure.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. So use the red flag test and the things that we've talked about so far, everyone, to get a clearer sense of whether it's time to stay or go. And let's keep going because this will help you with that as well. So tip number 3 is to define fulfillment first and think about what would be most rewarding and fulfilling to you in a job at this point in your life. And we want you to think about that first. And we'll explain why here on this next slide. The reason why we want people to think about fulfillment first in terms of their career is not because we don't think that salary is important, that your work environment is important. There's lots of different things that are critical to being in the right career fit, absolutely. But what we have found after doing this for a long time is that if you start to think about what would be rewarding and fulfilling to you first, you're going to get closer to what the ideal or like dream job would be for you than if you start with those practical considerations, like saying to yourself, for example, okay, well, I'm good at this type of thing, and this job would pay well, so, oh, let me go try it. Secondly, we found that our clients are able to come up with more career ideas, like brainstorm more options when they start with what would be fulfilling and rewarding to them first. They start to think out of the box a lot more and come up with different career options that they didn't even know existed or hadn't considered before. So it helps you with that creative brainstorming a lot more, and therefore you'll get closer to something that would be rewarding as well. And finally, we really assert that fulfillment is critically important to your career fit in the long run, because it can overshadow other things, other components too. If you feel like you're getting a sense of accomplishment, success, and satisfaction from what you're doing, you can compromise on other things a lot more. Now, let's talk about defining fulfillment and how we start to think about that, because a lot of times for people, it seems kind of esoteric and they're like, okay, how do I define what does fulfillment mean for me? There are 4 ways that you can do this. Number 1 is you can journal for a few minutes. So for example, sit down tonight before you go to bed and start to journal for a few minutes about how do I define success at this point in my career and like post-COVID, so to speak, or all the COVID impacts. Like, what does fulfillment mean to me now? And what does success mean to me at this point in my life and in my career, et cetera, et cetera. And the way you define success is probably going to be different than when you started out in your career. And this is part of why we want you to think about this. A second way to define fulfillment is to identify, but also dig underneath your interests and your hobbies and your passions a little bit more. Even those things that you do outside of work, those things where you lose track of time, either inside of work or where you've lost track of time work-wise in past positions, or the things that you enjoy in your personal life right now. Not because we're saying that those are the career or paths that you should pursue because they're really realistic, et cetera, because they may not be. But we want you to think about those interests and dig underneath a little bit more and think about what is it about each of those passions or interests that you really enjoy? Is it the creativity of it? Is it the risk or the challenge of it? The elements that you come up with underneath those passions and interests and hobbies, those could be elements that are missing from your current job that you want to try to find elsewhere, and things that you can write down to say, okay, these are the changes that I want to make. The third thing that you can think about to define fulfillment is to start to either visualize. We have our clients create vision boards for their careers, or some people who are, prefer to write it down, they'll write about what their ideal day at work is. So to think about your ideal day at work at this point in your job and in your career, and what qualities would that have? And then the last thing, and this is actually the exercise that we use with our clients right out of the box, that we find is the most kind of in-depth, if you will, and the most helpful, is to identify their top 3 to 5 career values by going through what we would call a peak experience exercise. A peak experience would be a moment in time or a period of time for you. And we like people to think about a personal peak experience because they'll get closer to what's really important to them as a person. And we want you to think about what was cool about that time in your life for you. A little bit less about the details of it, like, oh, I was with my friend Joe or whatever was going on, but think more about, like, why is that a peak experience for you? I'll give you a couple of quick examples. So 2 people, let's say, may have a peak experience of a trip to Italy. And one person might talk about what was cool about that peak experience for them in terms of the planning of the trip. Where were they going to go? How much time they were going to spend at each place? How are they going to get there, etc. That person is more like a project manager, kind of detail, maybe oriented type of person. Whereas another person may have that same exact peak experience, a trip to Europe or Italy, and they might be talking about, oh, I loved the food and the culture and the experiences, or meeting new people, something like that. Those are completely different, or a completely different set of values from the first person. So you want to think about, with your peak experience, again, to start to define what some of your values are. What was cool about that peak experience for you? And if you start to write about it, and even share it with someone else, a family or friend that you can trust and who knows you really well, they can start to pull out what some of those values are. And the goal is to have your career path or your next position, your next job, be aligned with those values as much as you possibly can, okay? If you feel like you need a little bit more help with this, we always offer a free career strategy session to give people a little bit more advice, especially if your situation today is a little bit more unique and specific, and also to talk with them about our coaching services. So if you feel like you need a little bit of additional help figuring out this fulfillment piece, or whether you need to make a change and how dramatic it needs to be, we're always happy to talk to people about our coaching services. Just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com, and it would be a conversation with me directly. Let's talk about number 4 for a couple of minutes before we get to Q&A. And this is kind of one of the biggest ones that I want you all to think about, because this career model, and on the next slide here, I'll show it in a little bit bigger way, so you'll be able to see it a little bit bigger on the screen, just FYI. This can serve as a checklist to help you determine where your current job is a fit for you and where it is not a fit, as well as help you define what the right next career path would be. The reason why we like using our ideal career model for this specific kind of situation is the model shows you all of the different components to a satisfying or correct career fit, if you will. And it helps you be more objective about what's going on for you and consider all the necessary components of the right fit. And what we would recommend is to review each of these pieces kind of one by one, step by step, in order to, again, determine, okay, where is my current position fitting and where is it not? And then flipping it on its head and saying, okay, in an ideal world, if I had all of these, what would that look like? So let's look through this just for a few minutes here. So fulfillment is the first piece that we want people to look at, and we talked about that already. Are you getting a sense of satisfaction, accomplishment, and do you feel like lit up inside in any way, shape, or form as part of your current job, yes or no? This is where your career values would go. The second piece we want you to look at is we go left and then we go up and across, is to think about, are the tasks that you're performing enjoyable for you? So how often during the course of your day are you performing enjoyable tasks? Do you get into your work? And are the tasks that you're performing, like, in some cases enjoyable and in some cases not? And where are the ones that get, like, write down a list of what are the ones that you are enjoying and what are the ones that you don't? The next piece we want you to look at is your strengths, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a moment with career assessments. But are you leveraging your strengths on a regular basis? And are you leveraging the strengths that you want to be leveraging? Because some people will tell us, you know, I'm really good at spreadsheets, but I'm sick of doing them. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to shift my career in a different direction. So don't just think about strengths in general, but think about, are you leveraging the strengths that you still enjoy and want to be leveraging consistently? We want you to think about too, how much in your current position are you leveraging your education and your past experience? If you want to leverage both of those things. In some cases, you may say, there are some classes that I really enjoyed at Georgetown, and I want to get back to that kind of stuff a little bit more. And with your past experiences, it's really good to kind of take a career inventory and say, when have I enjoyed my work and when have I not? And what are the themes there to start to understand what you might want to have instead? And then finally, the last three pieces to consider, which are really critically important, are your personality type, the work environment, and compensation. Personality type and how well it fits with the role that you're in, as well as the culture of your organization, is a make or break for your career fit. I can't tell you how many times we've worked with clients. And we had a client once, just as a quick example, who worked at one of the big four consulting firms. And when she first came to us, she said, I'm so unhappy. I feel like I need to go be a chef and open my own restaurant, like do something completely different. And when we worked with her through the process of going through our model, et cetera, she realized that she was actually in the right type of role for her in a lot of ways. A majority of the problem for her was actually the work environment and a little bit of the personality type of her boss. We've all heard that before, right? People leave people, not jobs or organizations. Supervisor and your relationship with your boss is critically important to satisfaction. So you want to think about your personality type and how well it's fitting with your role and with the work environment. And we have had people also say, I'm in the exact right job, I'm in the exact right industry, but the work environment, the culture of my organization is not a fit for me. For example, some people might say my values are not aligned with the organization anymore. That I don't believe in the mission of our organization, maybe because leadership has changed. That will impact your career satisfaction so much that it is time to make a move if that's the problem. And then finally, last but absolutely not least, is compensation and how well you feel like you're not just compensated financially, but also this one is about the benefits that you receive too. And this is a biggie in today's world. Are you able to work flex hours? Are you able to work remotely if that's something that's really important to you? This is something that we are encouraging people to ask about more so than they ever have. We don't want you to ask it in the first interview, you know, at the very beginning, but it's something that you can be more assertive about and more confident in asking for different kind of like flex time, working remotely, et cetera, than ever before, because employers are listening. We are finding that our clients are even telling us, those that are currently working at their organizations, they're seeing different things, like their organizations are giving them their bonuses earlier. They are starting to take these employee satisfaction surveys a lot more seriously than they did before. We have one client who got a brand new job at AT&T. He was in professional development there in HR for years and years and very senior. And they opened up or started a whole new role, not just for him, but it was called employee engagement, because they realized that they needed to pay a lot more attention to that. And one of our other clients, his organization is giving to their employees a stipend for education, and they can use it for any type of education, including personal things. And he's actually not just doing professional stuff, but he's taking scuba classes. Now, is that the case everywhere? No, absolutely not necessarily. But it's an example of how much more employers are realizing they are needing to listen to what employees are asking for, or else, as we've been talking about and seeing, they're going to go somewhere else and find it. Let's talk about career assessments before we start to move to Q&A here in just a few minutes. And we'd like to go ahead, if we could do our last poll here and go ahead and open that up, that would be great. We do like career assessments. So just talking about these for a couple of minutes here, if any of you have ever taken a career assessment to help you figure out whether it's time to stay or go, we really like them, but we wanted to kind of share a couple of caveats with you about them. Career assessments we find are really, really helpful. Assessments like the StrengthsFinder assessment, we really like that one. Myers-Briggs, there's lots of different even free versions of the assessments online. But the StrengthsFinder assessment we tend to like a lot for different reasons. Even if you just purchase the lower cost option of that one where you get just your 5 strengths. The website for that is strengthsfinder.com, and I'll put that in the chat here in just a few minutes. We really like the StrengthsFinder because it helps you get clear on your strengths, figure out if your current career trajectory is aligned with those, but it also gives you really good language to articulate what those strengths are that can be very helpful for you when you're asking for that next promotion, or when you're preparing for interviews, you can use that language. The thing that we want to be careful about with career assessments, though, is to keep in mind that it's only one piece of the puzzle. So if we go back to our career model for just a moment, if any of you have taken a career assessment and said, okay, this was helpful, but I thought it would give me an answer to like what type of job I should be in, and I really didn't get that, please know that you're not alone. Usually career assessments, while they're accurate and they give you good information in a very short period of time, they usually do not cover all of the pieces of the model. So they're not like a one-stop shop for figuring out, okay, what is the right career path for me next? Assessments may test you for your strengths, but that's it. They may give you a little bit more insight into what your personality type is, but they're not going to test you for, oh, what's the right work environment for me? And they might, even if they do give you job options or career ideas, they're not necessarily going to talk with you or take into account compensation or some of these other things. So again, while we like assessments, if any of you have taken them before, and we'll hear about that in just a moment, remember that it's one piece of the broader puzzle. It doesn't cover every single piece. So we don't want you to take their career assessment and just assume that it's like this right or wrong thing and that's it. We want you to consider all of the different components of the career model in order to really make the right next choice. So what were our poll results? If we could hear about those, that'd be great.
So we had 31% of people respond yes and 69% respond no.
Okay, interesting. All right, good to know. So for those of you, if you're curious about them, or those of you who have taken one before, again, we like the strengthsfinder.com assessment, and I'll put that in the chat here in a moment. But we've also found, by the way, that if you just Google like free career assessment, you can find a lot of really cool free tests online too. Just keep in mind, it's one piece of the puzzle, not the whole broad stroke. So don't put too much pressure on it. Take into consideration everything else too. Now, finally, before we get to our Q&A, and we also want you all to start to come up with like one action step that you will take in the next week here, because we really want you to walk away with something tangible that you can implement right away. We know that thinking about this whole idea of making a career change, it's a big deal. Our jobs are a big deal. They pay our bills. They take up a lot of our time. You know, they can add to or decrease our satisfaction in a big way. So we don't want you to take this decision lightly, which is obviously why we're here today. And we also want you to think about some of these things on this slide too, as you're considering whether it's time to make a change and how big of a change it is. Read the room of your organization and industry to get a sense of, are they thriving or struggling? And are they the type of industry, for example, that is going to be able to grow past COVID? Or are you in an industry that is struggling, and that's part of maybe your dissatisfaction? And that may, you know, give you a clue to, I need to try a different industry that's going to survive and thrive. And the second thing that you want to consider in terms of your satisfaction too is, if you can't make a change like right at this time, you need to give yourself a little bit of runway to, you know, think about different options and be practical and realistic about your change, which we want you to do. Are there things that you can ask for where you are now or at the next job that will make you happy? And part of why I say this is because in some cases for us, it's harder to make a really dramatic change. Even if we feel like we need a big change, we may need to have like an interim job in between before we get to that dream job. So if you can't make the change either immediately or as big a change as you would like to right away for different reasons, can you ask for or get into a job that has a little bit more flex time? Because that would help you. That would give you maybe a title change or a bonus or something like that. So these are things not only that you could negotiate in your next position if you decide to make a move, but things that you could try to think about for the short term too that could increase your satisfaction. All right, so come up with, I'm going to say 1 or 2 action items, depending on how assertive or energized you feel. 2 action items for the next week that you will take. It could be reviewing the ideal career model. As a reminder, if you would like our slides, you just email us at the email address at the bottom there. It could be, I really feel like I've been so unsatisfied in my path, in my job for so long. I really need to get back to figuring out what my career values are, for example. Or it could be sharing a peak experience exercise with a friend or family member or a coach like us to help you figure out what some of those values are and how you can start to incorporate them into your career path. So let's go ahead and let's get to our Q&A if we could. And Allie, if you could kind of, you know, conglomerate them or whatever the right word is, especially if we've got some that are similar, that would be great. And I was trying to find, while we're doing these, I'm going to put the StrengthsFinder assessment in here and any other, how do I send question to chat? I don't know if I can put, I'm going to put this in the chat feature, Allie, and you can help me make sure I'm getting it out to everybody.
Okay, perfect.
Just in case, because I'm putting it somewhere and I'm sorry, I'm trying to like choose everyone. I'm not sure I'm getting it.
I see it. Here, I'll drop it in for everyone. Okay, everyone in the audience should be able to see that now.
Okay, good. I feel like I'm good with technology, but sometimes I still can't figure it out.
No worries. I'll take this opportunity to just remind everyone to please use the question panel on the right side of your screen to pose any questions to Hallie. We did have a couple come in. So for the first question was, if a company culture is conservative, for example, getting a promotion takes 5 or more years, is that a good reason to leave?
That's a great question. I do think it is if you're antsy and you want to get promoted sooner than later. But what I would do is, even if that's typical and even if that's kind of their policy, I would first, if everything else is good and that's the only one thing, I would first try to ask for a promotion sooner. And, you know, ask them, okay, is it feasible? Is it possible? What are the things that I need to or can do to work towards that? And then evaluate based on whatever that answer is, if it's time to make a move or a change. So if that's the only reason, I would try to do a little bit more where you are just in case. and see what they say and then make a decision at that point. Because typically I want people to have more than one reason before making a move. Usually like, 3 or 4, because usually that means, okay, yeah, it's definitely time. It's a really good question though. Ask them first.
Thank you, Hallie. The next question we had was, sometimes looking for a new job can feel overwhelming. What are examples of small, tangible steps you suggest to get started?
It is really overwhelming. We totally get that. So give yourself kind of a wide berth of like, okay, set a goal for yourself of like, I'd like to maybe have a new position in the next 3 to 6 months. Like give yourself a time frame so that you feel more in control and you also don't feel like you're in as much of a rush, but you have a goal to kind of work towards. The first thing, honestly, that I would do is I would review the career model to figure out, okay, what is the right next step for me? Get clear on your goal before you do anything else, because your job search is going to be easier and more effective if your target types of jobs is as narrow as it possibly can be. Then you're obviously not writing 5 different kinds of resumes, et cetera, et cetera. So get clear on your target. But one of the next things that I would do is also, I would start to like just set up some alerts on some job boards just to see what else is out there, to take a little bit of like pressure off the process. And again, because there are so many job openings out there, to just get kind of the lay of the land and a sense of, okay, who's hiring, what types of openings are out there that look appealing to me and that I would be qualified for. That can help give you like motivation and inspiration for what's out there. Because if you get like excited about some of those openings that you see, it'll get a lot easier because you're going to be motivated and energized. So those are 2 of the things that I would do first. Great question.
Great. The next question was, I've been in my dream job for 11 years, but I'm tired of it and the limitations that come along with it. Is it possible to be in your dream job for too long?
Great question. I love that one. I don't think I've ever gotten that one before. That's fantastic. Here's what I would say, and I'm speaking from my own personal experience. I do think in some cases it can be a little bit too long. Here's what I do to kind of make those adjustments. And I realize that it's different and unique for me because I'm a business owner. So just that disclaimer and caveat. But I do think you can be, because eventually we get so good at what we do and we know it so well that it can almost get like old hat and boring. So if there's a way that where you are now, you can, for lack of a better way to say it, like spice things up a little bit, create a new challenge for yourself, adjust the way that you perform your role, or adjust your role in and of itself, or try something new, maybe that's similar to what you're doing. Most likely what we find that people who get burned out and they're already in their dream job, it's because they haven't had enough challenge and they need to kind of mix things up a little bit. So that's what I would advise there. And hopefully that answers kind of broad strokes. It's a great question.
Thank you. The next question is, if there is a new boss coming to the team, but you've been unhappy in your current role, do you recommend leaving now or waiting to see how it goes with the new boss?
I'd wait to see how it goes. Now, I will say this, if you go through our career model, just for example, thinking about that, and everything else is, or wait, let me say it the other way. If you go through our model and there's other things that are an issue with your current job, and they're really big ones besides the work environment, which is where I would kind of put a new boss in, then you should probably be prepared to move even after you give that new boss a little bit of time. But if I were you, I'd set a time frame for yourself and say, let me see how this goes with the new boss, because there could be enough changes that it makes a difference for you. And give yourself like 3 months with the new boss, see how it goes, and evaluate at that point. So give it a little bit more time just in case, because you never know, but have the career model kind of in the back of your mind so that you can think about, okay, it may be time to make a change afterwards.
Wonderful, thank you. The next question is, how realistic is it to change careers in your mid-50s?
That's a great question too, because a lot of our clients tend to be kind of, we call mid-career to a little bit later career. It is feasible, I would say, in a lot of cases right now, because the job market is what it is, that it's a good time to try to make a move. I think it's also more feasible than it used to be in the past because people are just, they're working longer. So it's not like we're as close to retirement age as we used to be. And I'll be 50 next year. So I'm kind of speaking from my own thought process as well. So I do think it's possible to make a change. You need to be realistic about it and realize that most likely you and I are not going to go be an astronaut tomorrow, but who knows? Like, I would push yourself to make a change, as big of a change as you would like to, but just realize that you may have to like pare it down a little bit and look at things that are similar or related to what you've been doing if you need to be a little bit more realistic. But I say go for it. And if nothing else, look out there and see what's available. Great question.
Got a lot of great questions in the chat. So thank you guys for submitting them. The next one is, could you address and provide any suggestions for being burned out at the end of your career? So for example, if you're planning to retire in a year or so, how do you recommend staying motivated and pushing through any difficult situations?
See if you can identify again or reconnect with what your career values would be, because that's something that, like, I even have mine on my desk. And it sounds really silly sometimes, but when I'm performing a task or working on a project or, a program or whatever it is, and I realize it's aligned with one of my career values, it actually gives me a lot more energy. And when I choose to spend or focus more of my time on tasks and projects that are aligned with my values, that helps a lot too. So I would do that first, because if you can get a clear sense of, okay, what those values are, and if there are any adjustments you can make in this last year to align with those values inside of your work, but maybe even in some cases outside of your work, that can help give you that energy to stay motivated for that last year or two. It's a great question.
Thank you. So the next question is, any words of wisdom for those thinking of changing careers, but also still feeling like they can make a difference in their organization, especially for newer employees or employees from underrepresented groups?
Yeah, that's a great point. I might say to yourself, okay, what has the difference been that I've made so far? And what's the last maybe remaining bit of difference that I would like to make at my current organization? So kind of what's left? What are the 3 or 4 more things, whatever it is, that I would still like to do? And then plan that out and think about it and say, okay, can I accomplish those things maybe in the next 6 months, 8 months, year, whatever it is, to make a plan for yourself. Again, have a runway of, okay, I'll stay here for X amount more time. I'd like to implement, if I can, these 3 or 4 more projects or programs, or finalize these things to feel good about them making a move. And then say to yourself, okay, I'll make a move at that point. And how do I want to make a difference at the next organization? Because that can help you start to think about and frame out what maybe the right next job is that can help you continue to make that difference for the different types of groups that you'd like to. That's a really good question too. I love it. These are very thoughtful.
Yes, and I know we're coming right up to that 12:55 time, so we just have 2 more questions.
Okay.
The first is, I started a new career during the pandemic and have been at my job for 15 months. If I leave next month, will that be seen as me being a job hopper?
That's a great question too. I don't think so. I think that because of the pandemic and people for so many different reasons change jobs, some because of choice and some not by choice, that people's resumes just naturally do look spottier than they have in the past. You've been there long enough, I think, to not be seen as a job hopper. It also depends on how your resume looks from before then, but just kind of broad strokes, I do think it's okay. Great question.
Okay, perfect. And for our last question, we have, what if you've been ready to leave, but it feels like there's nowhere to land? If you've been with the same organization for 10 plus years and you start to apply to new jobs, hiring managers seem to think something has happened to make you want to leave.
That's a great question too. I think it's about how you position yourself on your resume, what you're saying to them, if they ask for a cover letter and if you could submit one, something like that. But you know what? You can say at the top of your kind of summary statement in your resume, you can give a quick, like, third person, writing it in third person versus first person, because that's a no-no on your resume. But say something about why you're looking, like seeking, next opportunity and new challenge in this particular area. So you can reference something there and try to have that not be in your head, because if you're thinking that, sometimes you'll be projecting that during the course of an interview, etc. So just focus instead on, hey, I've got all of this great experience and I was loyal to my organization, and why that is an asset and makes you a great prospective employee. And then you can reference it there on your resume a little bit too. That's a good one to end on. I love it.
Awesome. And I know there were some questions we didn't get to, but Hallie's contact information will be included in the follow-up email. So please look out for it there. Hallie, thank you so much for taking the time to share these insights and your expertise with our alumni community. And thank you all for joining us today. Please look out for our follow-up email, which will include the recording of today's session, the handouts included in the presentation, information on how to schedule a complimentary career strategy session with Hallie, and a calendar of our upcoming programs. Thanks again, and Hoya Saxa.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.